Professor Suri actually teaches multicultural counseling, right? Let me actually start now so we don't go too late. So hi everyone, welcome to our program. We have an engaging night planned out for you with some of the very best speakers on the planet. I'd like to acknowledge Professor Tanupit Suri for bringing in her counselor ed students today, our student affairs colleagues, and our very illustrious campus life staff, David Chakape, Nathaniel Gaskew, Patricia McDonough, Brittany, Hilario, and Emily Wellen. So I'm going to read the bios of our panelists, and then I will ask each of them two questions. And if you have questions, please add it in the chat, and we directly after the speaker talks, and we'll try to get to your questions. Okay? So John Holloway currently serves as the Vice President for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion and Belonging at Emory and Henry. He previously served as the Dean of Student Affairs at Lehman College for 7 years. While at CUNY Lehman, he led efforts dealing with Title IX, education, orientation, and transition programs, and the peer educator employment opportunity. He has led ongoing support for LGBTQ community members and has founded the Urban Male Leadership Program, which provides support for the Black and Latino males at Lehman. He has previously held student life and housing positions at the University of California at Santa Cruz and various institutions. And Susan Im is our second speaker. She is a footwear merchant turned strategic business partner, focusing on leadership development and culture. She has over 25 years of experience as a merchant brand builder and people leader to create inclusive environments where people can thrive. Her focus is on career development and internal mobility. She believes diverse experiences help us identify our skills, interests, and values. Her goal is to empower associates to own their career journeys and continue to grow. She is a certified coach who helps individuals unlock their potential and find their authentic leadership voice. As a first-generation immigrant, she wants to help underrepresented youth discover the multitude of careers in the business of fashion. And our final speaker is Petia Abdur-Razzaaq. She is a digital marketing strategist with more than 20 years experience. Her tenacity to help small businesses expedite growth via digital communication is evident. Petia helps businesses create a digital strategy that delivers meaningful and measurable results. Her experience combined with a passion to serve others has helped many small businesses plan and execute effective marketing strategies to gain digital influence, retain loyal customers, and increase revenue. So let's welcome our panelists today. The first panelist, our VP for Student Affairs. Can you please tell us a little bit about your current role and time at Lehman, and also discuss 3 strategies to foster inclusivity within teams?
Great, I sure will. I'll just share my screen first. And can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, good evening, everyone. As Suzette indicated, my name is John Holloway. Let me just start out by saying that I really got very nostalgic about this presentation tonight, which is probably one of the reasons why I included that photo of my time at Lehman College. My focus and my connection with students when I was there, while I was there, you'll notice that's right on the side of Schuster Hall, I believe. And that was my former boss, Jose Magdaleno. I miss Lehman College. I miss Lehman College a lot. I miss the people. I miss the administration. And I've worked at very different parts of the country. And Lehman College was actually the first place I worked where I worked with students like myself, because I was born and raised in Harlem, and I worked so many different places, but Lehman was the first place that I worked at. I came back home that represented my upbringing. So I'm very, again, have the strong affinity to Lehman College. And let me also say that I don't take for granted anytime that I have an opportunity to speak with students, particularly about this DEI and D work and inclusion and working in clubs and organizations and just, future. I think it's really important, and these are things that can make a difference. So let me also just say real quickly, I want to thank Suzette and Nate and David and Emily and any other folks who were involved in pulling this together and for inviting me to join me. So you might not be able to tell from my youthful appearance here, but I've done this work for a number of years. I've worked in a number of student support service programs very closely with students. At Emory, at Lehman College, excuse me, I worked directly as the dean of students, and we, as most dean of students do, we did troubleshooting for both academic issues inside of the classroom and life issues. And I have a strong affinity for the work that I did there. It mattered a great deal for me. Now I work at a very different place. I'm at Emory and Henry College. It's a small, predominantly white institution. It has about 1,100 students, which was actually a part of the attraction for me in working at a small school. Basically is a PWI, and it has a 25% BIPOC student. And so this presentation that I'm doing today on inclusion for teams, this is what I do on a daily basis. And it takes on a very different level of importance at a school where there's so few students of color. So as mentioned, I work at Emory, and it's a very different place than the Bronx, than Harlem. And if you don't mind, I just want to take a moment and share a slide with you. Would that be okay? Don't judge me now, okay? I have chickens. I moved from Harlem, from the Bronx, and I have my own chickens. And this was me sort of transitioning to Emory, Virginia. I love it there. I love it there, but this is my life now. So I'm a bit of a budding farmer. I thought I would share that with some levity. So I wanted to before I began to really underscore that there need to be some entering assumptions we have about inclusion. First, let me just say that I felt foolish after calling you, Suzette, and asking who were these students, were they leaders in organizations, and I felt foolish afterwards because, when you talk about inclusion, when you talk about work in groups, this is work for everybody. This is work for not just leaders in corporate America or in the workforce or clubs and organizations. Everyone has some of a responsibility and a role that can be played in making sure folks feel welcome and in a part of. And then also an assumption I have is that my talk today is not about you solely in your current roles, but it's also forward thinking with you as professionals. And so I want to talk to you, hopefully with application that has both 1 foot in the current and then 1 foot also in the future. So let me jump right to this presentation. And I think that developing inclusive teams is a wonderful topic. Gotta say, Suzette, it is a challenge. It's a challenge to be able to talk about this in such a short period of time, and also to pick three areas only to talk about this, but I'm going to take a stab at it. So my three strategies that help to foster inclusivity within teams. One is to build trust across differences. And there's no real legitimate way to underscore how important it is to be able to work across differences, to communicate across differences. The other is implicit bias, or your biases in general. I think it's important that we all take a pause when we are interacting at times with groups and with individuals, and appreciate what we're bringing to that interaction. And then finally, that we eliminate and check any language. Language is a major factor when talking about ways that we can be more inclusive. And so how we can be careful to check any exclusive language that would hinder our efforts to build a more solid team. So again, before I begin, I just want to have this sort of a shared understanding what is inclusion. So basically, inclusion is everyone being really valued and everyone being respected and at the table, and being mindful about perceived VIP groups and how that can potentially break down our efforts at building teams. I know that for many student groups that I work with, that they often will and I know that this group can appreciate this, that sometimes the students are voted into positions and they assume leadership is about position, but we know a great deal more about leading folks. And one of the things our leaders need to make sure that we are mindful of is that that we are really patient with the process of making sure folks feel included and valued, and that folks feel like there's a lot to do with involving them. And bottom line is that even though folks may not vocalize it within your groups, they still may hold you accountable for not doing things that will help them flourish in the overall group setting. So being mindful again and being really observant to what happens inside of the group. Again, underscoring again, what can we do to make sure that folks feel welcome? And again, these three areas of encouraging and celebrating differences, recognizing bias, and really checking on behavior. And also underscoring that this doesn't happen overnight. This is a ever evolving process. And so anyway, I'll move on. So real quick, these are some of the benefits of inclusion, and I won't go over all of them. I know that you can see them all, but basically, I had a pastor many years ago who really had a goal of having a diverse church, and then when it happened, it took him for a loop because it was difficult to manage. And so one of the things that, with all the benefits that we see and we can appreciate here, that there are certainly lots of benefits to helping to shape an inclusive team. Understand that it takes work. It takes a lot of hard work, and but that the overall benefit is outstanding with regard to, particularly if you're in the workforce and you have an opportunity to build inclusion in your team, and it really can make a difference between someone doing just what's necessary for the job and someone who feels a live part of the team and its efforts folks will go above and beyond, and that's also included with your work in student clubs and organizations. Building trust across differences. Real quick, I know that one of the things that's difficult for many people is how we can communicate across differences. But this is a critical piece in how we build inclusion in teams, and that is we need to be able to, even when times are difficult, even when we have difficult circumstances that may happen in the group, or when we bring people together from different walks of life or different cultures, we need to be able to acknowledge, to connect, to create connections with folks in the group to help to break down any difficulties with differences. We know that we live in a world now where folks just have these polar opposites, and we really can't find ways to connect and to be able to have conversations. And if you can do this piece, if you can be committed to working across differences within your group, don't allow it to isolate you. Don't allow it to create a stumbling block. To be committed to working with folks who may be different from you and finding ways to create a sense of connectedness with them. So real quickly, we have so 95% of our students are living in housing, living on campus. And we have this one residence hall, real quick, that we call the Peace House. And this house is made up of all these diverse students, 25 students total. And very early in the semester, very early on, it's a honeymoon stage. But at some point, things get real and it becomes very difficult. And this is a great example of what happens when things get real and you need to communicate across differences. So be committed for that. Bias. I suspect that you dealt with this before, Suzette, in your program, but we approach this world through very individualized lenses. And so the way we see the world, if we bring that interaction to small groups or to individuals. And so those interactions really help shape how we believe and how we perceive the world. And so I'm not sure whether you talk about the thought of folks having a backpack, what we used to call a knapsack. Peggy McIntosh's work, where you take with you all the things you experience in life and you bring that with you, which she calls white privilege. But I would argue that everyone brings a sense of those experiences with them, and it impacts your work when you're working with others. And so as a team leader, as a team player, understand that you are bringing different experiences and different ways of making sense of how, so what you need to do is to make sure that you, again, take an opportunity to pause, to understand what you are bringing to the interaction, and making sure that you understand and can appreciate that as a team, as a person who's involved in the team, that you bring a set of biases to the experience. And then finally, how am I doing on time, Suzette?
You're doing good.
Awesome. So finally is to eliminate and check exclusive language. Language matters, folks. Language is a huge factor in building inclusive teams, or just being someone who's in a position of being able to impact team or at least your participation. Let me say this to you real quickly, that I know, particularly in students, you're often involved in very different things, and sometimes you may be sitting in the cafeteria, you may be in a different group overall. Again, realize that it's difficult for you to take on and off different hats and people not still see you in a leadership role. And so you need to make sure that your language at all times is not necessarily something that's going to be offensive to some folks, and that overall that your language invites folks in and that acknowledges folks. And I think one of the things that that this statement makes clear is that often our efforts to try and create a sense of a group can sometimes create ways of pushing people out. And so being mindful about how language matters in creating groups. I think the finding ways also to make sure that we are mindful about that we careful about generalizations, that we respect pronouns, and that we find ways to identify and recognize someone based on their identity, and be careful about saying things like manpower and I think again, my overall statement with this slide is that we need to be mindful. We need to be mindful about our language. Language matters, and language can serve to defeat all of our efforts at being able to create an inclusive group. I'm good. Was that good timing, Suzette?
That was great timing. And this is such a large topic, so you had like to condense it in such a short amount of time. Folks, we do have time for one to answer one question in the chat, and we are going to go with the first person who types that question in. So I see like we have one. Emily, I see you put the message here. I know we have school counselors in the room, and they have been studying this in depth. Professor Suri. So studying multicultural, and they studied Daryl Twing Sue, I think, who is a multicultural expert also. And so I want to give you a moment to think about your question and just put it in the chat. And we're gonna go with the first question though.
It's someone that has any questions.
There has been a massive attack on DEI movements across the nation right now.
Yeah.
So I think, sometimes when you live in the bubble of, we see things, when we are in higher ed, oftentimes we are in bubbles, and we think that the world sees things in layers and textures like we do, and you get so surprised to see that this is the first thing that's on the chopping block when people are cutting budgets right now.
This is hard work. This is hard work. I mean, I used to have an opportunity to introduce DEI, and now politicians are defining it. And I think it really underscores why DEI is so important.
Yeah.
Right, we actually have two questions in the chat. So I'll ask the first one and then see if we have time for the second one. But how do you work with people who are resistant to DEIB work?
Yeah, I have 19 head coaches that I work with at with the Head Coaches Council for DEIB, and not many of them are really open to this work, particularly because remember where I live and where I work. And I think one of the things I try and do is just take the sting out of the label and really, again, try to figure out ways to take the sting out and to diffuse some of the language that really represents the DEIB work inaccurately. And so what I'll do is just my goal is to work to make sure folks feel comfortable, feel welcome, feel valued. And what I try and do is I make sure that my role is not perceived as the vice president for the Black students or the Latinx students. That's one of my biggest fears, that I would walk through the cafeteria and one of the white students would say, "Oh, that's the VP for Black students." My goal and ways I can find ways to diffuse DEI and B is to make sure that the umbrella is as wide as possible and that folks can see themselves benefited from this kind of work that we do in college.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Suzette, do we have time for just one more question? Because I think we're on time.
I think we could do one more and then.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So how do you measure effective leadership specifically in the education field?
How do I measure? There's a lot of work that I could be doing with regard to measurements, but I think that most of my time is looking at outcomes of folks who've been changed, and so we do a lot of work with outcomes. We set things up in advance to show where we want to be, and then we just spend time with students to make sure that there's been some type of impact and effect on the work that we do. We often will go into the classroom, for example, and spend time with our students. And I do teach a class as well here at the college, and we spend a lot of time making sure that we can measure through focus groups and through outcomes, learning outcomes, and other examples of ways that we can have students reflect on sort of a pre and post sort of description of what they've learned. So if I answered your question. Pretty important work that we do, absolutely.
Yep, thank you. Thank you so much for this, sharing your wisdom. He's actually still at work. I'm going to another meeting.
My apologies, folks.
I appreciate so much you sharing your wisdom with us today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everyone. So nice to be with you. I'm so glad I had an opportunity to visit with you today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Susan, thank you so much for doing this for us. Susan, the history of, I read Susan's bio, but the history of her as a speaker at Lehman is she did a phenomenal workshop for us during COVID. And most of the students were asking, when are we ever going to ask her back? And so every opportunity we wanted to make sure that we asked her. So Susan, would you please tell us a little bit about your current role and your work history? And then please discuss 3 secrets to starting your career off right. And folks, the same method, just add your questions to the chat and we'll ask Susan the questions after.
Thank you so much for that, Suzette. And I'm so glad to be here as well. Thank you for having me, everybody. I'm currently the lead for career pathing at my company, which is Caleres. It's a footwear organization that's global. And I'm leading career development as well as internal mobility. I pivoted into human resources in 2021 after more than 30 years in the business of footwear. So I'm going to ask David to start with my slides so I can give you a little bit of a snapshot of myself as well as go into some of the tips that we're talking about today. So the 3 secrets to start your career right, there's obviously a lot more than that, but I wanted to make sure that we focused on some of the more important ones. And I really like the idea of unspoken rules because I do think that it's up to us to really help demystify the workplace. So David, if you can go to the next slide. So a little bit about me. I think Suzette had mentioned that I'm a first-generation immigrant. I grew up in Brooklyn. I've attended all public schools, Brooklyn Tech, University at Albany. So I really feel very connected to Lehman and the work that we do here in CUNY. So I'm really glad to be here with you all. One of the quotes that I really love is be the person you needed when you were younger. Not having a lot of resources and not having networks to be able to help navigate school and the workplace makes it very difficult for each of us to do on our own. So I love the idea of being able to share some of those secrets with you all to make your roads a little bit easier. The next page has a little bit of a snapshot of my career. So over 30 years, all in fashion footwear. These are some of the companies where I've spent a lot of time. And these are some of the various roles that I've had. Started out as a buyer, went into sales, merchandising, product development, and then pivoted into human resources. So have done a lot. all different parts of the organization, which I think is very typical right now when you look at a lot of people's careers. It's not so linear. A lot of people are doing many different things, and it's all about skills. So I think that's something that I want to make sure that you all get as well. So really, when I kind of thought about the top 3 secrets, the first one is a quote from one of our former CEOs, Terry Lundgren, and he would always say, "Bloom where you're planted." Some of the things when you grow up in retail and in fashion, so imagine you enter a training program at Macy's, it really matters what area you're in, right? So some people might want to be in cosmetics, some people may want to be in footwear, but someone's got to buy pots and pans. So what he would always say is, it doesn't matter where you are, just bloom and do the best job you can when you're there. Reality is, your first job is going to be a really foundational experience. No matter where your career takes you, you're going to learn how to be a professional. You're going to learn how to navigate the corporate environment. And at the same time, it's a time of self-discovery. You're going to figure out what you enjoy out of work, what you don't like out of work. You're going to observe a lot of leaders around you, and really you're going to start sort of modeling for yourself what type of leader you want to be in the future. So it's a very important time. You've all been in school for a long time, and you've all mastered that. You know exactly what you need to do to get through class, to be able to get an A, etc. The workplace is a little bit less clear cut than that. So I think it's just really important to just realize that your first job is very important. Next slide, David. So when I think about blooming where you're planted, these 3 things come to mind. It's about competence, credibility, and communication. Next slide, please. So when we talk about competence, it's really about learn all the aspects of your job and master it. So no matter what it is, really learn the basics. One of the things that's super important that I tell anyone who's new to a role is understand how your company makes money. Like, what is this business that you're in? How does the work that you do fit into that major mission for the company? How does your role fit into the organization? Those are really important things to be able to connect the dots on. That's going to really help you navigate the workplace. And then be curious and ask a lot of questions. Anytime I ask anybody in the organization, hey, what advice would you give somebody who's going to start and replace you in this role? They say, just keep asking questions. Don't hesitate. Figure things out as you go. Next one, credibility. Your reputation, you're building that now. Not only as a student, but whatever your first job is, your professional reputation starts now. So really thinking through, how can I deliver quality work on time, consistently? How do I make sure that I'm somebody people want to work with? Everything that we do these days is all about collaboration and working with other teams. So how do you become a really great team player? And then how do you communicate effectively? Communication is probably one of those real distinctive sort of characteristics of really effective leaders. So when I think about some folks who are really advancing in their career and someone who's not, communication plays a big part of that. So I'll go into that a little bit more later as well. And then the last thing is really communication skills. So this quote, I think, says it all. You can have brilliant ideas, but if you can't get them across, your ideas won't get you anywhere. Reality is, a lot of companies are big. My current company now has 9,000 people. When I was part of Macy's, we had 120,000 people. So it's really important to make sure that people know who you are. Really being able to use your voice. How do you add value in any and all meetings that you're a part of? How do you make sure that you know your audience? How you speak to a peer and how you write your emails to a peer is going to be very different than how you write with somebody else who might be more senior to you. Really figuring out how to clarify your writing. A lot of companies are global. We have partners in China, in Vietnam. We have materials departments in Europe, all culturally different, and really figuring out how to write very crisply and clearly so that people understand you is very important. Next slide, David. The second thing I wanted to make sure we talked about was nurturing your networks. Networks are such an important thing. I know networking doesn't always get some positive press, but it really is something that's vital, especially now when things are digital and there's companies everywhere and it's such a global environment. The broader your network is, the more successful that you'll be. Next slide, please. So how can you grow your network? So I say start networking now. It's really, about being able to connect to folks within the company that you're in, being able to do it outside your company as well, within an industry, being able to connect with people who know other people. Most job seekers will tell you that they find opportunities through their network. I'm a great example of that. I was able to pivot from the business of shoes to human resources because I knew the CEO. I had worked with him. I bought shoes from him many years ago, so we had a really good relationship. He knew I was credible, and it gave me this opportunity to be able to come in and do something totally different just based on my experience. And that's not really, that's not my only job that I got that way. When I kind of think about the last 3 companies I've been a part of, that was all through networking. So that's really important. Connect with folks in other departments and really be able to create a peer network. Why is that important? You want to understand other parts of the company as well. One day when you're interested in making a move across to a different department, you want to know somebody that you can connect with, someone who's going to give you some insider information and tell you, hey, we have an opening that's coming up. It's not posted yet. Maybe you might be interested. So all of that is really important. Networking, especially on LinkedIn, is a great way to really discover mentors, sponsors, find people that you connect with, that you have things in common, as well as advisors as well. I always tell people, network before you need the network. So for example, when I was part of Macy's, every year we went through a little bit of a what I would call a culling. So we'd close some stores, people would get laid off, etc. And at one point I said, you know what, I'm going to get ahead of this and I'm going to just make sure my LinkedIn profile is great and I'm going to connect with as many people as I can. And once I did that, I started to really look at my network. I had 600 people or so that I connected with. And then I realized 90% of them work at Macy's. This is not helpful. When something happens here and I've got to make a move somewhere else, that's not helpful. So those are the things that you have to think about as you're thinking about growing your network. Next slide, please. And then lastly, and this is really the most important, be a continuous learner. The world is changing very fast and the world of work is changing as well. Next slide, please, David. So, the only constant in life is change. The only constant at work is also change. So being able to be agile in your learning is super important. We're talking a lot about skills right now. So continue to build on your skills. Some of it may be technical. Anybody that works in an office setting, I say spend as much time as you can, Microsoft Office, whether it's Excel, PowerPoint, Power BI, etc. The more that you can be technically sound in all of those things, the more efficient and the more easier any job that you're in will be. Social skills, to me, they're still the most super skills that you can have. Communication, collaboration, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, all of those things are skills that you can actually continue to build on. So really focus on what those are. When we start thinking about career pathing, and that's the role that I'm in right now, we don't really look from job to job. We're really looking at what is the composite of skills that you bring into a role. What are your interests and what are some things that you want to do in the future? And what's the gap and how can we help you build on those? So the whole idea of skills, you're going to hear a lot going forward. Even on LinkedIn, when you have a profile, you'll see they ask you to list all the skills that you have. They'll recommend jobs for you based on how many skills you have that match with those jobs. So the whole idea of skills versus roles, you're going to hear a lot about going forward. Leverage every experience that you have to solve new problems. At the end of the day, I gave you a snapshot of all the jobs that I've had. I've done 10 different things within fashion footwear. I have to tell you, each job helped prepare me for the next job. They're all sort of foundational pieces that help you think about the business in a different way, and it really gives you an advantage. So always make sure that you're leveraging all the experiences that you have to be able to solve what's in front of you. And then again, being curious and being adaptable to me are the most important things. Flexibility in how we work, how we learn is something that every employer is looking for. So, when we look at resumes, if someone's been doing the same job for 15 years versus somebody who's maybe had 4 jobs in 15 years and have showed that they can learn and do different things, that's going to be a consideration when we make that decision to say, hey, as our company continues to evolve, how will this person fit in? Our company, the company that I'm a part of right now, is 148 years old. So we're getting to our 150th anniversary, and we continue to evolve and grow. We went from being a wholesaler to then having a retail organization, then to being online, then so you've got so many different things that are happening all the time. And of course, AI is a big part of what's happening in any corporate environment right now. So the more that you can really think about learning agility, and you're all good at this, right? We've been students for a long time, but just keep that mindset going, that learning is really growth, and that's going to help you throughout your career. Thank you, David. I think that's it for me, right? Yes, thank you. I have time for questions, and please reach out and connect with me on Susan at LinkedIn. Just Susan M. IM is the last name.
Thank you, Susan. Folks, so many good things in there. Even your inclusion of AI and talking about learning agility in this kind of post-COVID world where hybrid work is almost a norm, right? And David put the link for Susan's LinkedIn here. Folks, do you have questions? We really have time for 1 or 2 questions in the chat. So feel free to drop the questions in the chat. And these can be from, I know we have club presidents. I see leadership students in here, council ed students in here. Folks, feel free to just add your questions. And Em, I know you always have a question brewing. So if we'll give folks a chance, and then Emily can ask her question. Susan, when you talked about networking, I was remembering it was Jada who worked at Lehman who introduced me to you. What a great connection.
It's always that 6 degrees of separation. You see that everywhere.
Yes.
I guess while people are taking time to type in their questions, because it sometimes takes a while to type.
Yeah,
oh,
no worries.
We actually have a question next, so I'll jump into that first. Do you think it's okay to spend years in a role or change within every 5 years?
Yeah, I think all of it is okay. I have to tell you, COVID changed everything. I think that there was a point where we would say, hey, that person's a job hopper and they're not committed to the organization. But reality is that's just the norm now. So I think that, when I joined our company back in 2021, we went through an entire sort of hiring, hiring process because of the fact that with COVID, we had furloughs, people left the company, people moved to different locations, et cetera. So there's a lot of folks that you'll see right now who are within organizations for 2-3 years, some maybe a year, and then they'll figure out something else. I think that that's something that employers right now are a lot more understanding of than they were in the past. To me, as long as they're intentional changes, meaning that you have a goal in front of you, you know exactly what you're working towards, and you're making different changes to be able to get there, great. If you have a resume that's got 5 different jobs on it and they're all, one was in restaurants, one was, as a data scientist, one was at a library, and it's hard to kind of figure out how to connect those dots, then maybe that's not so great, because it kind of seems like maybe, you don't really know what it is that you want to do. Or maybe you're somebody who gets bored easily and just want to keep trying different things. So, a lot of times employers are making a lot of just assumptions based on what's on that piece of paper. So even if with that example, if there were certain skills that really went through job to job to job to job that you can highlight, and that's the reason, you love people. You want to be able to be customer facing, and, and all those different jobs gave you that experience. Something like that would make sense, but it's really up to you as a job seeker to make sure that you're making that easy for the employer to understand. But I would say really these days, the tenure in a job is not as critical as the experiences and the skills that you're gaining in each of your jobs.
Amazing. Thank you. If anybody has any other questions to put in the chat, and on that note,
I got a
Chris.
question.
Yes, Chris.
So to get a job, like it's not the job you want, it's a job that you need to start with, right?
Yes. Yes, but and that's the thing too, right, Christian? It's sort of, you don't know if you're going to like that job. You sort of, you have some ideas, of course, right? And hopefully there's a reason that you're going there. It's not just that it was the first job that said yes to you. Sometimes I know we have to do that because of financial reasons, etc. But there's something that you can learn from any job that you're in. So really being able to make those connections and network with people within that company, because sometimes you're in the right company in the wrong job. So what do you do in that case? You foster your networks. You get to really understand where the business is. You do your job, you do it really well so that within 6 and 9 months, you can talk to somebody about a different opportunity. So I would say, just really consider, once you make that step and you make that investment in going to a company and they make that investment in you, really think about, how can I make this work for me?
Amazing. Thank you.
It's really good advice, Susan. Thank you so much for this. I also loved one of the things that, or I loved so many things you said, but in particular, when you said, where do you fit in? Where is the money following the budget? Where do you fit in the organization? Like, those are such very key questions and for us to think about. So thank you so much for that. I mean, folks, if you think of questions, I'll try to get them to Susan, but I want to move on because I want to respect everybody's time on this. And Susan, thank you so much for this. Petia, we are going to move on to you. And we are going to ask you 2 questions, please. Please tell us a little bit about your current role and work history. And please discuss 3 ways we can leverage social media for effective leadership and personal branding.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. So my topic is personal branding, and I will start this by saying and being honest with you that I didn't have slides at the beginning of this meeting. I was like just thinking I'm going to come out and hang out. And then the other 2 presenters had slides, but guess what? I have slides now because I do this a lot. And so while I was listening along, I was putting my presentation together. So hopefully there are no typos, but hopefully you guys will forgive me because I was being honest in telling you that that's what I was doing. I think it kind of makes sense even for you guys to have some takeaways and to refer back to. So here we are. Okay, so a little bit about me. I always like to start from the beginning. So I'm originally from Guyana in South America. I was born there. I'm very proud of that because a lot of people say I'm Guyanese or wherever, and they're not really Guyanese. I was born there and I lived there until I was 15 years old, and then I came here. So it's been over 30 something, telling on my age here, but I'm definitely Guyanese. All right, so when I came here with my family, I was put into the 11th grade, so I graduated a little early, and I left New York. And of course, all Guyanese go to Queens first. That's like little Guyana. So did my family. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to Simmons College, which is in Boston, Massachusetts. And it was definitely a rite of passage for me. It was definitely my first time away from home, not only in a state that I wasn't too familiar with, but in a country that I also was not too familiar with. But I am really happy that I did that because it definitely widened my view of the world. I got to interact with a lot of different people, and I think it kind of like developed a fearlessness in me that I definitely rely on today when I go out here and I do different things. I've worked many places, but the 2 places that you guys would probably recognize the most would be Boston.com. That's the Boston Globe's website. I was actually originally part of the startup team at Boston.com. So the Boston Globe was the first newspaper that went online. They called it Boston.com, and it was an amazing time to be there. It was also the very beginning of any kind of digital marketing, and I always chuckle to myself to see what we called digital marketing back then and the evolution of what digital marketing has become now. It was like nothing like it is today. Also worked some time at Polo Ralph Lauren. I mentioned that because, when I do these talks, I like to connect things. And so in my business now, I work a lot with fashion brands and lifestyle brands, and my time at Ralph Lauren, I think, definitely impacted that as well. I also have an MBA, and I went to Pace University here in the city. And Emily will recognize this slide because this is usually how I introduce myself to my classes. I was kind of like copy and pasting. I am today an adjunct professor at Lehman College. I teach Intro to Social Media Marketing, and I teach social media execution skills, and I also have taught a consumer behavior class. So that's the part of my life that I absolutely love. I'm also the lead digital strategist at the Stylista Group. This is my own company. I've had the Stylista Group for 14 years. And in her introduction, Suzette told you all about what I do there. I'm also a speaker with the Grow with Google program. So I'm not an employee of Google, I'm a contractor. And that program hires people like me to do trainings and presentations to small businesses, communities that are experiencing the digital divide, to help them to upskill and become more aware of all the digital assets that are available to them. Then I had a little prep pod project that I was a part of called Brand Rewind. And this was with three initially marketing professionals, and we would just kind of go online and dish on personal branding mishaps or great examples, as well as the mishaps and great examples of corporate brands. So this is my business, the Stylista Group, and these are the kinds of brands that I work with. This is a snapshot of me. This was Jacob Javits, I think 2 years ago, wearing my Grow with Google hat, doing a presentation. And this was Brand Rewind. This is one of my favorite, not various. There have been various favorites, but this is my absolute favorite Brand Rewind that we did. These were all female business owners that we were interviewing and having them share all of the things that they do to build their brands as well. Okay, so before I get into how you can use social media to establish your personal brand, I think it's worth it for us to talk about the definition of a personal brand, right? Like there are a lot of buzzwords out here, people use them, but they don't necessarily know what it really means. And it's really pretty simple, right? How do you want people to identify you or talk about you when you are not in a room, right? So when someone says, hopefully, when someone says social media or digital marketing, like I want to be at the top of mind, first 3 people, right? That someone thinks about once they have interacted with me, right? And so you will notice that everything that I do professionally somehow involves social media, digital marketing. And as I get deeper, I tend to focus on the verticals or the segments of the market that I work with. So that would be your fashion, your beauty, your consumer goods, even the way I show up to these things, right? Like I'm always wearing an interesting piece or something, because when someone is out there networking and somebody says, I have a fashion brand and I need help, I want them to think of me, right? So it's also in the way that you present yourself appearance-wise. And then, of course, in the digital world, it's how you interact online as well. All right, so let's move on to my question. These are the 3 ways that I think that you can harness the power of social media to build your personal brand. First of all, by creating content that is in line with whatever your personal brand is, right? And so first of all, you have to decide what your personal brand will be, right? So content creation and sharing. You can do 2 things here. You can create content that belongs to you. That can actually take a lot of time. And if you don't have a lot of time or resources, you may struggle with that at the beginning. The second way that you can be a good content sharer, however, is by resharing content from credible third parties. And as you reshare, don't just reshare it, but add your spin to it. So I'm sharing this article because I agree with whatever the author is saying, or from my experience, this is what has happened when I have done X, Y, Z. And so you become known for being somebody who shares really, really great information. The second point here is networking and relationship building, right? So this is your opportunity, you guys, to connect with people around the world, right? The digital space does not have borders. You will need to figure out what communities you need to become a part of, right? Join them, listen into conversations, right? And then begin to interact. You just can't listen in, right? You should listen in initially so that you're aware of what these discussions are, but sooner or later, you need to raise your hand, introduce yourself, and add value. Now, I know sometimes when it comes to being on camera and this sort of thing, some people are shy. That's fine. I don't know if you guys are aware of the platform called Clubhouse. Clubhouse was launched during the pandemic. There are hundreds of thousands of discussions going on in Clubhouse 24/7, literally, where you don't have to be on camera. It's all audio, right? You can raise your virtual hand and you can add value to the conversation. I know someone who is booking high paid speaking gigs, and that was his strategy. He joined a bunch of discussions in Clubhouse. He would raise his hand, and he always thought of a way of adding value to the conversation. And so over time, people began to follow him as an individual, right? And again, he was strategic in terms of the groups that he was participating in, right? And then over time, he actually moved on to the third point, which is thought leadership and advocacy. So once you build community, once you're known for the value that you add, once you're known for the quality of the content that you share, you will find that people will start coming to you first. And when they come to you first, that means that you are now being seen as a thought leader in the space. Like you are the one who is actually giving the best advice, who's sharing the best resources. And the advocacy part comes in. This is where you will, so now you have reached this level of awareness, right? You can look around you and see other causes, individuals, whatever, that you can now support on your platform and bring attention to. And this is really, really very important, you guys, because, we all know about conversations going viral, right? If you have respect in the digital space, you actually, even as a student, have the power to affect change, right? So this is an amazing time. Like when I was in college, none of this was going on, but I've seen the evolution of it. And I think that you guys just have to have a little bit of fearlessness, and just go out there, right? So these are my 3 tips on how you can use social media to establish your personal brand and to build community. So if anybody has any questions, you want me to go further, I can take them now.
Wow. So much good stuff here. I mean, Emily also put the course that you do in the chat, and I actually, full disclosure, emailed it to myself to be like, I will be doing this course. Because this is such a wonderful information you just shared, and even about adding value. Folks, we will give you a few minutes to add a question or two in the chat because I don't want to monopolize it, but this is so great what you just shared.
In the meantime, while people are writing their questions, I have a question.
I've spent so much time.
But one thing that I struggle with social media is the negativity that you do come across. So what are effective ways to navigate and practice self-care and also while still being empathetic to whatever you come across on your platform?
Yes, I think you definitely have to filter those conversations, because one thing about social media that you guys need to be aware of is that, the algorithms feed you what they think you're interested in. So if you go down the rabbit hole too far with negative information or negative, content, the algorithm will continue to feed you that content. So you really do have the ability to filter what you see on social media. And the minute you feel like you're being too consumed with certain kinds of content, you just need to disengage, right? And start, looking at something else, something that's more positive, more fulfilling. And then the algorithm will go, wait a minute, this is what she's more interested in, right? Because you really can become a part of a depressing situation, right? A lot of times also, a lot of what you're seeing may be misinformation even, right? And so it's an unfortunate situation for you to really get dragged down with that. So you just really have to be careful and be aware that ultimately you can control, right, the information that is fed to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Emily.
Oh, we have another question. So, is it easier to start by promoting other people's content first? And how can we do that?
Yes, I would say that that is definitely a route that you can take. So if, I don't know what your personal brands may be, but what you need to do is seek out the influencers and the credible people in that particular space, right? Make sure they're credible. You don't want to be resharing information that's not credible, right? And you can actually start to build relationships with them by sharing their content, right? Everyone who understands the value of social media is monitoring what's going on with the content that is out there or their content that they're producing, right? And so over time, that influencer or thought leader may see that you are resharing their information. And this is why you should also add your thoughts to it, right? And it's happened to me. They will reach out to you and say, hey, thank you for sharing that information. Tell me more about you. How can I help you? You would be surprised, that even famous people that appear to be extremely busy, they're willing to help. And sometimes all you have to do is ask, right? So what I would say is identify the people in your space who you admire, who are where you want to be, right? And you can actually start resharing their content, but then adding value by adding your commentary, right? Until you get comfortable enough creating your own content. And who knows, they may even invite you to become a part of their conversation, which is amazing. That's actually one of the most effective ways for people to build a social media community. Because if that person is already considered to be an influencer or a thought leader in the space, by endorsing you, automatically people assume that you are at that level as well.
Wow, that's great advice. Emma, I think you have, is that okay? Just a survey. Thank you so much. So, folks, we want to stay good to our time, and I'm very proud of us for the first time in our life, Campus Life team. We stuck to we actually stuck to the schedule and the time. We had,
Excuse me, I have a question.
okay, Christian, go ahead.
So this is recording, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Like, is for the teachers or the people, or the hosts, or for everyone?
We will be posting this on our YouTube channel at Campus Life. And I know, Christian, you're part of our leadership cohort,
Yeah.
so I'll be sharing this
I'm gonna
within the chat.
I'm gonna send you the written stuff. By the way, I'm gonna be sending you the written stuff tonight.
Okay, Christian, no problem. Thank you.
Folks, thank you so much to our panelists. I mean, you can't hear us, but we are so appreciative. Thank you very much. Susan, Petia, you are so wise. The wisdom that you shared and just the expertise is, beyond me. And I'm glad we recorded this because we can play it back.
Right.
I know Patricia, our Campus Life team works so hard and they all are still, look how tired they are. Patricia, Nate is literally sleeping and looking at us with his eyes open. Daniel Gaskew, Emily, Will, and David. Thank you folks so much. And I also saw some of our student workers on here, leadership students. Professor Tanu Suri, thank you so much for bringing your class. School counselors, you know you are always close to my heart. I teach as an adjunct in the school counseling program. But we are so grateful for you spending this time with us, folks. And our office, the Office of Campus Life, is here to support you, even though you're grad students who may never step foot on the campus. Feel free to email us at campus.life@lehman.cuny.edu. We're happy to connect with you and talk to you about different resources that are available. Folks, hope you all have a great night and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.